In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the King's Indian. We're going to have the same move order as the Grunfeld, but instead of d5, bishop g7, and we take the opportunity to take the Grunfeld off the table here with e4. Now after d6, d4, castles, bishop e2, and I'd like to point out that there's a few variations here. Knight b d7, knight a6, bishop g4, and then the main game is going to cover e5, which is by far the most popular. And we'll start with bishop g4. And I want you to notice in King's Indian positions with e5 and eventually f5, they get locked up and it's a big attacking game. You need this bishop if you're playing black for potential sacrifices and attacks on the king. So notice how Ulf handles it. Bishop e3, support the center. Rook c1. How are you going to attack me? c5. Okay, lock it up. Castles. And then finally h3. Forcing the bishop to trade, and without that bishop, the chance of a successful attack for black is very low. Ulf has the bishop pair, superior minor piece play, and after queen b8, bishop g4 deviates and improves on a game from 1989 that Ulf won, but this pressure is already building, and we have a great game with black. The natural breaks are dealt with in the position, and moves like knight e5, I can look to start kicking and pressing. Next up, I have variation that Ulf probably wouldn't play, but I like chunking and making ideas easy to remember in these simple repertoires. And against knight b d7 and knight a6, we're not going to be able to get what we have in the main line, but I've got an interesting line for you. Knight d2. And typically you face e5, you lock it, and on a5 they're looking to secure that square. We can already disrupt the opponent and bother them a bit with h4 in the spirit of Ulf. And I do enjoy playing these types of positions because it gets black out of their element and it's a relatively simple game. And as we'll notice with knight a6, the beauty of knight d2 is that you get the same sort of position in both games. So I recommend this as it puts black on his back foot, and the typical plans don't work that well here. It's easy to surprise the opponent. And in many regards, that's Ulf's philosophy. The concept of disruption or being annoying. So here after e5, the typical plans of the King's Indian are going to involve the center being locked. So say for instance castles, knight c6, d5, knight e7, and white is going to break through on c5, black is breaking through on f5, and it's an all-out attack on the king. Well, Ulf, being the very solid player that he is, doesn't like to be attacked. And in fact, he knows that black wants to play this aggressive type position, so he decides to play the most innocuous variation. And though again, this is objectively equal, still tough, and it puts black outside of its comfort zone a bit. So after takes, we trade queens, no attacking possibilities for you. A little bit of pressure with bishop g5. Knight d5, threatening c7, forcing a trade, improving our pawn structure. c6. Simply playing bishop c4, and here's our only real deviation from the main game. C takes d5 and b5. If b5, a5, a4 to make sure our bishop's not getting kicked any further. Takes, takes, and after castles, there are 9 games in the database, and all of them are draws from this position. But again, we've seen like in game 1, this is not a major concern for Ulf because he will keep playing because there's very little risk of losing. And most of chess is your opponent makes a mistake and you capitalize on it. Comfortable inequality. After bishop c4, c takes d5 was played in this main game that we're looking at. After bishop takes, Knight c6 was played. If knight d7, knight d2, and knight c4 is roughly equal, but this looks quite annoying for black to face still, as the knight has an excellent square in d6 to jump into. But knight c6 is a bit of an error, as white can get excellent play. Grab, grab, rook d7, and already we've got a little bit of pressure on key squares. And this is Ulf's kind of game. King b1, no problems on the c-file. Bishop e3, overprotecting d4 and staying flexible, keeping a watch on the b6 and a7 pawns. Compare all the white pieces, and then what does white do here? Ulf goes, what is the worst placed piece? How can I improve it? The knight on f3 is not doing much. Let's go ahead and get him involved. Oh, bothering the rook. Well, don't like the idea of going to b7 and potentially having to trade or get trapped, so rook d3. Oh, we're in the trading business? No, we're not. We keep tension when our pieces are better than our opponents. Knight d4. A pawn is hit. And we don't mind you capturing. It's going to improve our rook. b3. Simple, effective, waiting to see what he does. Check. Knight c4. And what's the only easy weakness to get to? The base pawns. a7 pawn is weak. So knight a3. Here, king d7 should be equal because it covers the c7 square, but king e6. And we see again, 2400 rated player going sideways in an equal position. What does Ulf do? Rook c7. And we see another rendition of Ulf's minor pieces is better. And this was actually the opponent from game 1 in the Grunfeld as well. So he felt the pain twice of good knight versus bad bishop. King c2, f3, securing a pawn on the opposite color of the bishop. And here it's all a matter of technique. a3. As bishop takes, it's not going to work out too well as the king gets deflected one way or another here. And with the sideways opposition, we got a runner, and it's much faster than his pawn because he's going to have to step out of the way. So king d6. It's all part of the plan. All a matter of technique. Protecting the pawn tactically. Pawns are on the opposite color of the bishop. Great technique. And you may be able to go after that guy, but we got a runner. And what do runners do? They in fact run. e7. Now a bit of calculation will show that that's a win, as the knight can very easily get back one way or another to stop the pawn while our king is collecting. And it's a girl. And that'll do it for Facing the King's Indian. On to the next one.